My parents sold the car I spent years restoring to help my sister, then watched me collect every cent back through a repayment judgment I built piece by piece. It wasn't revenge, it was the only way to get my life back, and it changed our family forever. I placed the manila envelope on the table between the fruit tray and the sympathy cards, and let my fingers rest on it for a second, steadying my breath. Soft voices drifted from the living room, the hush that always hangs after a funeral. A spoon clinked against porcelain somewhere. The house smelled like chicken and lilies and a kind of heavy quiet that sinks into the walls. Kayla was standing at the sink, twisting a dish towel, eyes rimmed red from crying. Her hair stuck to her neck. She looked small, suddenly, in our mother's kitchen. "This is for you," I said. My voice came out low, careful. "And for them." Tom looked up from his armchair like I'd just switched the channel without asking. Marian turned, hand still pressed to a stack of napkins. Her mouth tightened even before she knew what it was. She always knew when something was about to be inconvenient. "What's this?" Kayla said. She didn't look at me. She stared at the envelope like it was going to tell her. 31 months, I said. Wage garnishment starts next cycle. We finalized it last week. No one said anything. The house breathed. I told you, I said, softer now, because the room and the day were already holding enough. Every cent. Kayla swallowed. The towel slipped from her hands and hit the floor, a damp little sound. Tom stood halfway up, then sat back down. It wasn't satisfaction that washed through me. Not triumph. Just the clean, cold line of a boundary finally drawn where there'd been only mud. The envelope waited. I let it. Before any of this, before I knew how a house could hold tension like a second roof over the rooms, I spent my Saturdays in a garage that breathed like a creature in summer. Doors open, box fans pulling air, dust motes drifting like something kindly. I was 19 when I found the car. It wasn't the kind of thing that shows up clean or easy. It was sitting under a lean-to near a cornfield outside of Cedar Grove, Ohio, the paint oxidized to a dull, tired blue, its tires eaten by time. A 1969 Mustang Fastback. Not for everyone. For me, though, it felt like someone had cracked a door in the wall of my life and said, "Here. This way." I had saved for 3 years, late shifts at Murphy's Diner, mornings at the hardware store. I had a spreadsheet with each line color-coded, the numbers marching like an army across the screen. There was nothing else. No trips, no tuition yet, no new clothes. I rode my beater Civic with the window that didn't roll up unless you coaxed it. I took my coffee black and my pride quiet. When I counted out the cash for the Mustang to a farmer named Kent, his eyebrows went up. "You serious?" he said. I smiled. I've been serious for 3 years. It came home on a flatbed that Saturday. The neighbors watched. Boys from down the street stood with their arms folded, pretending not to be impressed. My father stood in the driveway, hands on hips, the sun glancing off the gold flecks in his eyes. Tom could be a careful man in a way that made you feel like if you could just follow his instructions, the world would cooperate. He had a way with old things. Radios. Pocket knives. He respected stubbornness when it belonged to machines. People, he believed, could just try harder. He helped me push the Mustang into the garage. The smell was immediate, old vinyl and dust and oil, a thin knife of mouse nest. "You're naming her?" he asked. He liked the ritual of ownership. "Acapulco," I said, running a hand over her quarter panel. Hers was Acapulco blue. He nodded like that was acceptable, like I had answered a test question correctly. Marian leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You'll need to keep it here," she said. "Your apartment building doesn't allow non-running vehicles." "I'll bring it up to speed fast," I said, already in my head building lists. Fuel lines. Carb rebuild. Brake hoses. Fluids. Electrical. There's a way love looks when it's a checklist. It's less grand, but truer. My sister Kayla floated through the door on a laugh, 2 of her friends trailing behind her in that loose way kids move when they don't have to carry anything heavy. She was 2 years younger than me, a comet of a person, bright and sweeping, convinced the universe would continue to fling things into her path, just because she was beautiful and in motion. "That thing's a wreck," she said, cheerful as ever, kissing Marian on the cheek and snagging a grape from the counter. Why not get one that actually starts? Because this one will be mine, I said, not looking up. Kayla wrinkled her nose, already bored. You want to go to the lake later? She asked me. I looked down at the worn leather steering wheel, at the cracked dash. I've got plans, I said. I liked the way early mornings felt when I didn't have to talk. I liked the language of bolts and hose clamps, something that could be loosened and tightened and, if you broke it, replaced. I liked listening to Tom talk about torque and timing. I liked the way he smiled, the way he forgot to be critical when we were elbow-deep in something together. It was slow at first, a little hopeless. The engine coughed and refused. Hands got cut. I learned to swear quiet and keep going. Diego, a guy from the parts store who'd become my friend, came by on Thursdays with his habit of saying, "You're almost there," even when I was barely anywhere at all. 2 months in, on a morning in August, the street smelled like hot grass. I turned the key and she came alive. A cough, then a voice. Horsehair rattled in the seats. A mouse dashed away under a shelf. The idle settled. I forgot how to breathe for a second, then remembered. Tom leaned in the window and said, softly, "There she is." Sometimes, that summer, we'd run errands just to go anywhere. I'd drive Acapulco down Broad Street, kids craning their necks, older men giving me the nod like a secret handshake you get only if you've bled for something. At the Riverbend Cruise-In, Diego wiped her fenders with a microfiber cloth like he was brushing hair out of someone's eyes. People asked questions. I answered without apologizing. It felt like walking into my own skin and finding it to be a good fit. I kept the title in a small folder in Marianne's hall closet, tucked behind the quilts. It felt safe there. Their house was a constant, brick and maple and the same creak on the 3rd stair since I was 5. My apartment was loud in a way old buildings are loud, and I was afraid of moisture and mold creeping into everything I cared about. It made sense to keep legal things where the drywall didn't crumble and the roof didn't leak. I paid insurance. I changed oil on schedule. I learned her weight in gas mileage just by sound. I treated her better than I treated myself. It didn't happen overnight, the shift. It wasn't like anyone flipped a switch and our family changed tense. Kayla got pregnant at 21. Tyler was 22 and a good talker in the way people who want something are good talkers. He loved her hard for 6 months, then he loved someone else. By the time she had Mason, she was back in the extra room at Marianne and Tom's, the one with the big south window that used to be mine. I loved that baby like someone hung the moon within arm's reach. He smelled like lotion and warm bread. He slept on my chest while I read library books and traced the soft curve of his ear and memorized the weight of his whole life in my hands. Kayla was a decent mother on her good days. On her bad days, she wanted to be 21 more than she wanted anything else. Marian filled in. Tom bounced Mason in the recliner like he was rewiring a radio, focused, capable, no nonsense, surprised at how much he liked it. One fall night, when the air had that sharp edge that comes right before the first frost, Kayla knocked on my apartment door without warning. I had grease on my hands. Acapulco's carburetor sat like a complicated animal on my table. "I need $80, Kayla said, not bothering with hello. Diapers and formula and Tyler didn't send anything this month. "I can give you 50, I said. I just ordered parts. She rolled her eyes like I had offered her change. "You make more than I do," she said. "I pay my own rent," I said. She scoffed. "Okay, Ms. Independent." I wiped my hands. I gave her 60, because I had it, because I loved Mason, because it was easier. She kissed my cheek like a bribe and left without saying thank you. That winter, Mason got sick. It started as a bruised knee that didn't fade and a fever that hovered like a moth against a lamp. Cedar Grove Regional's pediatric ward was bright and cheerful in the way hospitals try to be bright and cheerful for children. The chairs were red plastic and the art on the walls looked like something out of a waiting room for a dentist who liked whales. We learned words we didn't want to know. We learned how to count hours between fevers like counting seconds between thunder and lightning. We learned that nothing in life cares how responsible you've been when cells in a small person decide to misbehave. Leukemia. The kind I had to look up because I didn't know how to process it otherwise. The social worker had a binder with tabs. Insurance covered some things and not others. There were charities, grants, community fundraisers. People donated casseroles and gift cards. Cedar Grove High School did a bake sale where teenagers in varsity jackets bought brownies for $5 without flinching. We took shifts at the hospital. Marianne, who was born to be indispensable, ran the calendar. Tom brought sandwiches with too much mustard and asked the nurses questions they didn't seem to mind answering. I read to Mason. I watched Kayla's energy do that thing where it burned up and then she crashed, like a candle trying to be a flashlight. The first time anyone said, "We need to consider big expenses," it was February. A night the parking lot was glass. Marian took me aside in the cafeteria, her coffee untouched, steam long gone. "We're going to need a bigger vehicle," she said. "Something that fits equipment and is reliable in snow. Kayla's car is a tin can." "Okay," I said. "Maybe I can help her find something decent." Marian took a breath. "We were thinking of using the Mustang." I stared at her. The light above our table flickered like the beginning of a horror movie. "What?" "It's sitting," she said. "Not being used. We could sell it. Get a van. Cover some of the out-of-pocket things. Copays, gas, meals." "No," I said. The word came out before I could soften it. "No. I'll help in other ways. I'll drive them anywhere. I'll pay for gas. I'll cover as many copays as I can. But the car's mine." "It's just a car, Lena," she said, and her tone made me feel like I was already failing a test I hadn't studied for. "Your nephew is sick." "It's not just a car," I said. "It's years. It's me." Marianne's eyes went hard the way they do when she decides someone is being unreasonable. "Family takes care of family," she said. "I am," I said. I pressed my palms to the table to keep them from shaking. "I'm at the hospital. I'm on every list. I'm saying yes to everything except that. I love him, and I love my car. Both can be true." She looked at me like she was measuring whether I was worth arguing with. "I'm disappointed," she said finally, like that was the trump card. "I thought you were different than this." That week, the topic kept coming up in smaller ways. Kayla glanced at me like I was a vending machine that had eaten her dollar. Tom didn't say much, but he didn't make jokes anymore either. The silence braided itself through things. On a Sunday, I took Acapulco out on Broad and let her sing a little, just to remember she could. Sunlight turned the hood into a mirror. I parked a block away from the hospital because a security guard had complained once about noise and then apologized because his son had loved cars too. I checked on Mason. I read him a book about a bear who wanted to see the ocean. He fell asleep with his small hand on the page. Kayla scrolled through her phone, pretending she wasn't reading the comments on the fundraiser page. I tightened the blanket on Mason and kissed his soft hair and told him I'd be back tomorrow. I didn't see the way the parking lot looked when I came back down. I didn't hear the quiet opening of the safe in the hall closet. The locks had seemed like they were for other people. The call came on a Thursday afternoon when the light was yellow in my apartment and I was paying my water bill on my phone. "Is the Mustang here?" I asked Diego, who'd borrowed my socket set and sometimes used my garage when his shop was overbooked. "No," he said. "I thought you moved it." I stood up too fast. My knee hit the coffee table, a bruise blooming even as my heart beat for elsewhere. "I didn't." He was quiet. "Do you want me to check around?" I called Tom. He picked up on the second ring, voice too casual. "Hey kiddo," he said. He only called me kiddo when he wanted something or when he'd done something and wanted me to think it was small. "Where's my car?" I asked. "No hello." A pause. Then, "Kayla needed a van." My throat closed. I held the phone away for a second, the way you do when you've been hit and didn't see it coming. "You did not." "Lena," he said. "Be reasonable. We'll make this right. Your sister needs." "You sold my car?" My voice broke on the word sold, cracked like a windshield. "It was just sitting," Marian said in the background. "We got a good price." "It was not yours to sell," I said. I was shaking so hard I had to sit down. "It's titled in my name." There was a small clink, like someone setting a glass down too hard. "We had the title in the hall closet," Marian said. "This is for your nephew. We couldn't wait for you to come around." "You forged my signature," I said. The words felt like a bridge I was about to cross and never be able to cross back from. "You always make everything harder than it needs to be," Marian said, the edge in her voice like something sharp you keep in a drawer next to the oven mitts. I hung up. I called the police. The dispatcher was kind in a bored way. An officer came to my apartment and stood in my living room and looked at my folded laundry like it might tell him anything. He asked questions. He made notes. He told me this was probably a civil matter. It's title fraud, I said. It's theft. You can take that up with a lawyer, he said, this guy with a face like my cousin Joey, like someone who'd played baseball. I'm sorry. I sat on the floor next to my couch after he left and stared at the spot where my coffee table met the rug. If you'd asked me the week before what losing the car would feel like, I would have said it would feel like rage that sets the world on fire. What it actually felt like was suddenly nothing made sense. I drove to my parents' house because I didn't know what else to do, because I still believed that if I showed up in person, they'd change their minds and we'd find a way to rewind. Marian was at the table with a checkbook. Tom stood behind her like a defendant. Where is it? I said. I didn't sit down. Tom took a breath. Sold, he said. $22,000 cash. We used it for the down payment on a van and a cover. Don't, I said. Don't explain like there is a version of this where I will say thank you. We're talking about your nephew, Marian said. You're talking about a car. We're talking about my property, I said. We're talking about my life. We're talking about you reaching into a drawer and taking something that wasn't yours because you decided your emergency erased my rights. I was shaking. What did you sign on that title? Tom looked away. Marian wrote a number. The sound of the pen scratching was loud in a room where my childhood pictures hung like witnesses. I practiced, she said. Because your handwriting is jagged. My jaw ached. You forged my name, I said. You broke the law. You broke me. The buyer didn't know, Tom said quickly. We're not going to drag him into this. You already did, I said. Mason's little toy truck sat on the floor by the couch, forgotten from the last time I'd kept him here so Kayla could go out. I picked it up and set it on the table, a weird irrational gesture, like returning something to order would help my heart find its place. You can be as mad as you want, Marian said, the way she did when she was done listening. But we're focusing on what matters. I am, I said. Just not in a way you understand. I left. I didn't slam the door. I had this stupid thought that if the door didn't slam, maybe it would be easier later to pretend this had all been said differently. I sat in Acapulco's empty space in the garage and let myself cry, slow and ugly, until the concrete had a darker patch where my shadow was supposed to be. Time is a thing you can measure by schedules and appointments and pill organizers, but also by the small ways social workers learn your coffee order and nurses start to call you by your first name. I kept doing what I'd been doing. The hospital. The late-night drives. The emergency grocery runs. I recovered from one betrayal by leaning harder into the thing I could trust, which was showing up where and how I said I would. Kayla started wearing a look like I was a walking lecture. She did not thank me for rides. She let her coffee go cold and then asked me to buy her another one because she needed something hot, and I did. Don't make a scene. Don't make her life harder than it already is. Those were my rules, not hers, and I tried to tell myself that meant I was being decent. Marian got louder in the spaces where she wanted me to be silent. She started bringing up the car in this careful, distant tone that made it sound like I was the one who had appended things. You'll feel better when you know what it saved, she said once, folding towels in my apartment like she was doing me a favor. Material things don't last. They can, I said. If you take care of them. Tom started looking older. Guilt doesn't always show, but it sits in the way someone holds their keys, the way their voice gets softer when you ask them how late they were out last night, the way they stand half in a doorway, like they might run if you ask the wrong thing. Diego found the buyer by accident, because small towns do that thing where nothing really disappears. Guy named Carl. He ran a machine shop on the edge of town. He had no idea he was buying a car with a dirty title. He had swapped the engine and sold the original to a kid in Dayton with a YouTube channel. He had painted the body a black that looked too modern for something with those lines. I'm sorry, he said when I went to see him and stood in his office pretending I wasn't going to cry. If I'd known. It's not your fault, I said, and meant it. His daughter drew pictures of cats on a whiteboard on the wall with erasable markers. The world is like that. Whole realities side by side. Cats and lawsuits and people trying to eat their lunch in peace. I found a lawyer. Not because I wanted to fight, but because every time I tried to sleep, I felt like I was drowning in a pool of something I couldn't see the bottom of. Her name was Hannah Lee. She had steady hands and a way of asking questions that didn't make me feel stupid. We sat in an office with quiet carpet, and I handed her a stack of papers that felt like a life. "Title was in your name?" she asked. "Yes." "They forged your signature?" "Yes." "Do you want to pursue criminal charges?" I closed my eyes, just for a breath. "No," I said. "There's a 5-year-old who needs these people to function. And if they go to jail." Hannah nodded. "Civil conversion, then. Demand letter first. We try to settle. If not, we file. And we keep it simple. You want the money they got from selling your property. Plus damages, if we can show harm." "I don't want to destroy anyone," I said. "I just want my life back." She handed me a pen. "We'll start with a letter." I sent the letter to Marianne and Tom and Kayla because the van was in Kayla's name and the money had flowed through their accounts like it was a river that didn't need banks. It was polite. It was professional. It used words like demand and conversion and title. It told them to respond by a date circled on my calendar in red. Marianne called me and left a voicemail that started with my name and turned into a lecture a full 2 minutes long. She said things like family and betrayal and you'll regret this and after all we've done. I listened to it once. I saved it. I didn't call back. Tom texted me a single sentence. "Let me fix this." He didn't follow up. Kayla sent me 3 emojis and then, 10 minutes later, a paragraph that started with "So you're really doing this," and ended with "You're punishing Mason." I stared at that screen until the light dimmed. Then I screenshot it and filed it in a folder named Car. Cedar Grove kept moving. People still went to work. The seasonal aisle at the grocery store still sold wreaths and then plastic eggs and then flags. The hospital put up a poster for a blood drive with smiling faces that didn't look like anyone I knew, but I signed up anyway. Everything got smaller and more intense. Mason's hair fell out. He wore a baseball hat with a cartoon dinosaur he liked. He called me Nana because he couldn't get Lena right, and I didn't correct him. Kayla cried at 3 in the morning on a Wednesday because the vending machine ate her dollar and she hadn't eaten since lunch. I put my arm around her. I felt her shoulders shake like a building under demolition and thought, we were babies, both of us, and no one taught us how to be women under this kind of weather. But I didn't say that. I bought her a sandwich. I put the wrapper into the right bin because the hospital had a sign and I was still trying to be a person who followed the rules. Hannah filed when the deadline passed. Summons were served. Tom answered. Marianne didn't. Kayla posted a photo on social media of Mason's small hand in hers, and underneath it the caption said something about warriors. I didn't like it or comment because I didn't know how to separate the truth of that small hand from the way my name was now a dirty word in their house. We had a preliminary hearing. The judge was a woman with short hair and the kind of black robe that looks less dramatic when you're imagining it and more heavy when you see how it sits on actual human shoulders. She listened. She asked simple questions. Did you sign the title? She asked me. No, I said. Did you receive any money from the sale? She asked. No. Do you know how the buyer obtained the title? She asked Tom. He glanced at Marianne and then away. We already had it, he said. It was in our safe. And the signature? The judge asked, looking at him like she was asking about a fact and not an offensive. Tom rubbed his temple. We did what we thought we had to do, he said. The judge looked at Hannah. We'll set a date, she said. There are days where you don't have time to think about your own life because you're busy counting how many steps there are from the elevator to the nurse's station and whether you locked your car and whether you can make your shift on time and then race back for the night round of meds. Those days we call survival. Mason had a good day in April. We took him downstairs to the courtyard where the hospital pretends to be a park. He chased a bubble with that serious focus kids get when something is so magical it needs all of them. He laughed. Kayla filmed it. Marianne posted it with a caption that made it sound like the world was holding us. I kept my eyes on Mason. You never want to make a story when you're living inside of it, but sometimes it grabs your outline and shakes it into a shape anyway. Hannah proposed a settlement to their attorney. We offered a repayment plan. I would waive punitive damages. I would not pursue criminal charges. They balked. Kayla said she had nothing. Marian said she wouldn't sign to reward your cruelty. Tom was quiet. I went home from that meeting and made myself pasta and didn't eat it. I sat at my kitchen table with my palms pressed flat and thought about going to the garage and touching the empty space where Acapulco should be. I thought about the way the house sounds when you turn off the fridge. Diego came over with a pizza we didn't eat either. He sat on my floor the way people do when they don't know where else to put the sad. You're doing the right thing, he said. It doesn't feel like the right thing, I said. He nodded at the empty counter space. Sometimes the right thing is something you can't put your hands on. Summer rolled in with heat that made the hospital rooms feel sticky even with the air blasting. I learned to carry a sweater because the pediatric ward ran cold and the hallways ran hot, and I was always somewhere in between. Mason had a setback. I hate that clinical word for what it is, a cliff edge. We spent a week inside a bubble of machines and readings and a whiteboard with a goal written at the top. Rest. Eat. Breathe. I kept his hand clean and wrapped the tape around his 4 lines the way the nurse showed me. Kayla slept in a chair with her mouth open like she was finally underwater, and all the noise of the last year couldn't touch her there. We lost him on a Tuesday afternoon with a rainstorm moving through town and the smell of ozone coming through the open window like a promise of something that wasn't promised to us. He fell asleep and didn't come back. The nurse's hand was on my back. Kayla made a sound that didn't sound like anything a body needs to make to keep going. Time did the thing it does when you can't look at a clock. It stretched and folded. People started arriving with food. The living room filled up with hugs that lasted too long and the sudden blank faces of people who don't know where to look when grief is naked in a room. I kept my hands busy. I made a slideshow of photos because someone had to and because I could. I chose the song he used to fall asleep to. I printed programs at the copy shop. The woman at the counter didn't know what she was handing me until she looked. I'm so sorry, she said, and I almost put my head down on the counter, right there by the stack of flyers for lawn care. The service was quiet and respectful and full of daisies because Mason had liked to pick them, chubby fingers crumpling petals, a serious look like he was choosing something important each time. We kept it simple. We kept it in town. People cried. Tyler showed up and stood in the back and rubbed his face and looked like he wanted to borrow grief the way he had once borrowed, like rent money too late, no interest in paying back. I stood next to Kayla in a dress that cared less about how it looked than whether it had pockets. She leaned into me once, for a second, the weight of her head a familiar thing, from when we were kids watching thunderstorms, counting the beats between flash and boom. She had mascara on my shoulder when she lifted herself away. After, the house returned to quiet. The casserole dishes were set out and the laughter was low and awkward, like music played on a speaker with a busted tweeter. People needed to talk about anything else for it to be bearable. They needed to tell stories about nice things like old teachers and small dogs. I breathed. I put the manila envelope on the table. The paper inside was thick and formal. It didn't bring anyone back. It didn't mend anything. It did the only thing I had left to do that was mine. 31 months, I said, the math of it steadying my voice, anchoring me to something that wasn't just sad. Marianne's face moved through several emotions, shock, then anger, then that tight disapproval she wore like lipstick. You couldn't wait, she said, quiet, which is the sharpest way she could say it. I waited a year, I said. We offered a settlement. You said no. Kayla stared at me, then at the envelope, then back. You're doing this now, she said. She didn't sound incredulous. She sounded tired. I'm doing this because it's the only piece of this I have any control over, I said. And because I told you I would. Tom stood. He looked old. 57 suddenly felt like 70. We shouldn't have done it, he said. It was the first time he had said it like it was a thing that stood alone and not a thing he was trying to dress up as necessary. We were scared. I nodded. I know. He sat back down. I'm sorry, he said, to the table, to the air. Deep in his chest, the words sounded like confession and resignation and something else I can't name. Marian looked at Kayla. Don't sign, she said. Kayla reached for the envelope. Marian put a hand over it, and Kayla gently lifted Marianne's hand away. It was a small motion. I will remember it until the day I forget everything else. Kayla opened the envelope. Papers slid out like a card trick. Insider language. Hannah wrote it in a way that didn't sound vindictive. It just laid things out. What was taken? What was owed? How it would be paid, measured, and complete. How am I supposed to afford this? Kayla said in a whisper as if the papers might answer. You sell the SUV, I said. You get something used. You cut back where you can. You stop going out 3 nights a week. You look for another job if you have to. Marianne's eyes flashed. You have no idea how much she's already lost. I do, I said. I pointed at the photos spread on the credenza, the ones I had matted and arranged. I am not taking anything more than what you already decided you owed me when you cashed that buyer's check. This is what choices look like when they're written down. Kayla signed. Her hands were steady. She handed the pen back to me like we were strangers finalizing a transaction. There was a soft hiss from the other room, the intake of gossip. It felt like closing a drawer. It felt like finishing a sentence that had been dangling for a year, half-spoken and sour in my mouth. Later that night, after the people and the dishes and the way Marian banged the cupboard doors a little too loud, I sat on the porch steps and watched the streetlights hit the slow fog drifting in from the river. Tom came out and sat beside me, not too close. You're still my kid, he said, his voice a little rough. I know, I said. She'll pay it, he said. We'll help her. I know, I said. That's part of it. He nodded. We didn't say anything else for a while. A car passed slowly. The driver had the radio low, a song I barely recognized. Somewhere down the block a dog barked. The town held us the way Midwestern towns do, a neighborly arm around the shoulder that could be comforting or claustrophobic, depending on the day. There's this weird thing that happens when you're on the other side of a decision like that. Part of your brain has been in fight mode for so long that when you finally set your weapon down, your arm still shakes from the weight of it. I kept going to work. I answered emails. I stood at the copier and hummed under my breath without meaning to. Becca from accounting put a hand on my shoulder in the break room and said, "Hey, how you holding up?" And I told the truth and said, like a patched tire. First payment arrived as a check in an envelope with Kayla's handwriting on it, the loopy cursive I recognized from notes she'd passed me in high school that said things like, "You owe me a soda," and "Are we skipping gym?" The memo line was empty. The amount was exact. I held it for a second and felt nothing I'd expected to feel. No victory. No relief. Just the simple click of something landing where it had needed to land. I made a spreadsheet. I input the payment with the date and the amount. I watched the balance shift by that small number. Receipts over rumors. It wasn't about believing myself anymore. It was about proof. Kayla sold the SUV for less than she owed on the loan because depreciation is rude like that. She borrowed her friend Steph's sedan. She took a second job at a daycare afternoons. She texted me once asking if I could spot her for rent just this once, and I replied with a number and a date and said, "I can rearrange the schedule if you need an extra week," and she wrote back, "NVM." When she did text me, more and more it was about small things that didn't require me to fix anything. A photo of a corner of Mason's blanket she found under her bed. A question about the recipe for the lemon bars I make. A video of the sky over Cedar Grove the night we had that late summer storm that left all the gutters singing. Marian came by unannounced once, the way she used to when she was bringing me leftovers and advice disguised as compliments. She stood on my porch with her hands in the pockets of her cardigan and said, "I don't know how to do this," and I said, "Me neither," and we left it at that for a few weeks. Tom sent me a text that said, simply, "oil change," which is to say, he was making an offering in his language. I said yes. He came over and changed my oil out of habit and muscle memory while I watched him, and we talked about nothing and everything, how the Browns were doing, how Mrs. Voss next door used to yell at us for cutting through her yard. He washed his hands in my sink with that orange soap that eats grease and leaves you smelling like oranges and the garage. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen since the week after his father died. It was wrong, he said again, unexpected, like a tug on a sleeve. We told ourselves it was different because of the reason. But it was stealing. I knew that when I couldn't sleep. I nodded. "I know," I said again, and I did. Knowing doesn't undo anything, but it makes it possible to keep living in the same town. Hannah filed the judgment with the court and then with the payroll department of the grocery chain where Kayla worked. The letters went out. The garnishment started. It was small by design. I didn't want to break her. I wanted to build the kind of habit that would keep going even when I stopped watching. It was like watching a drip, drip, drip fill a bucket. Annoying if you focus on it. Comforting if you let it mean continuity. One afternoon, late September, I found myself at the Riverbend Cruise Inn out of habit. It had taken me a year to go back. Diego had been pestering me. "You can't give this place your ghost," he said. "You gotta put your body back here." He was right. I wandered past lines of cars, chrome and matte, the smell of burgers and rubber and a hint of cologne. I found myself at a row of older Mustangs. A man in a retired Air Force cap nodded at me like he knew something. Then I saw her. Not Acapulco, the lines were wrong in the way a haircut changes a face. But a 68 in a color close enough to make my chest tighten. The owner was a woman about my age with grease under her nails and a look like you didn't need to explain yourself. We talked. Her name was Ray. She worked at the Science Center in Columbus during the week and rebuilt engines on the weekends. We were laughing by the time the raffle for the 50-50 started. We exchanged numbers. Only later, walking back to my car alone under the soft lights, did I realize I felt something I hadn't in a long time, a combination of easy and excited. Found family shows up in places you don't plan, wearing grease-stained jeans. I didn't buy a car. Not then. I wasn't trying to replace anything. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I started taking the long way home on nice days. I let the air through the cracked windows. I listened to the sound my life made when I wasn't braced for impact. 4th payment. 9th. 12th. The spreadsheet started to look like something other than a wound. Kayla missed one in December and texted me 3 days later with a photo of a tire flat in an alley and a sentence, "I'll make it up next month." I replied, "Okay," and meant it. Brad from HR at my office sent around an email reminding everyone about the EAP counselors. I booked one. Her name was Erin. She didn't ask me to forgive anyone or pretend. She asked me how it felt in my body when I thought about the sale. "My shoulders," I said. "Like they live up by my ears now." She had me breathe. It was cliché, and it helped. She asked me what the car had been to me. I told her about the lists and the mornings and the sound of an engine catching like a heart-learning rhythm again. She nodded like those words were normal. I cried in quiet, controllable ways, the kind that leaves you less empty, not more. Spring came. Cedar Grove did its thing with daffodils pushing through dirt and the high school track full of teenagers pretending not to take themselves seriously. I took an evening class in small business finance because it had always interested me and because I needed something that had nothing to do with hospitals or legal letters or grief. I met Jamal there, who ran a food truck and needed help with his books. I started helping him after class for gas money and because he made the best roasted corn I'd ever eaten and because he laughed in a way that felt like an apology from the universe for all the tight places I'd been. I visited Mason's grave sometimes. The cemetery is not dramatic. It's flat, with a view of a water tower if you stand in the right place. Kayla had picked a small stone with a dinosaur carved into the corner. I would sit on the grass and talk to the wind about the bare book. I would tell the soft air that I had mailed the 14th check to the bank and that his blanket was in my hall closet and I wasn't washing it because I didn't want to lose whatever was left. Kayla came once, unannounced, and sat with me. We said very little. After a while she said, very quiet, "I bought a cake on his birthday and then I couldn't eat it." I said I left him daisies, and she nodded like that made all the sense there had ever been. A year and a half after the funeral, Kayla met me at the courthouse. She had a stack of pay stubs and a look that said she was tired of being looked at like she always needed something from someone. We sat on a hard bench together. "You know I hated you for a minute," she said. She said it like she was telling me a weather report. "I know," I said. "And then I hated Mom," she said. "Usually a good plan," I said. We both half laughed, like a habit. "And then I just got tired." She picked a piece of lint from her sleeve. "I don't want to owe anyone anything anymore." I nodded. "Me neither." "I got a raise," she said, like she was telling me the end of a story she didn't know the beginning of. "It isn't much. But it's something." Congratulations, I said, and meant it. She looked at me, really looked this time. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I just thought you should know I'm doing it. I know, I said. I see the checks. She smiled at that, finally, the same crooked thing she did when she was 5 and stole strawberries from the fridge and wore the guilt like a scarf. We stood when the clerk called our names. We signed papers to adjust the amount, not because I needed to punish harder, but because the math made sense now. We walked out into the square and stood in the sun. Marian slowed her car when she saw us standing there. She looked like she wanted to pull over, like she wanted to say something that would rearrange the last 2 years into something softer. She kept going. Tom called me that night and said he'd bought new wiper blades for my car because the old ones were streaking. Rain's coming, he said. I said thank you. The penultimate payment arrived in a month where the sky kept changing its mind. Storm, then sun, then storm again. I put my hands flat on the counter, like I always do when a transition is happening, and counted quietly to 10. When the final one arrived, there was a note in the envelope. Not a big one. Not dramatic. One sentence, written in the loopy cursive that used to drive me crazy for how unserious it looked. It said, "This is the last one, but I know the cost was bigger, and it didn't ask anything of me, and it wasn't an apology, and it didn't need to be." I put it in the folder anyway. I closed the drawer of my filing cabinet. The click sounded like a thing that ends and lets you start somewhere else. After, there wasn't a parade or confetti. I didn't stand on a chair in my kitchen and deliver a speech to the espresso machine and my cat, who didn't exist. I just had more quiet inside my bones. I bought a car. Carefully. A 1973 Datsun 240Z in a color the previous owner called Safety Orange and Diego called You're Never Getting Lost in a Parking Lot Again. It wasn't Acapulco. It wasn't trying to be. It was fast in a different way, elegant and lighter, a different breed of animal. I bought it from a woman near Dayton, divorce sale, and when I drove it home I kept expecting to feel a pang of disloyalty, and instead I felt like I'd carried something heavy for so long that my back needed to relearn what standing straight felt like. Ray came over on a Saturday, with a box of coffee and a dozen donuts. We pulled the Z into the garage. We talked torque specs and paint codes. We forgot to take pictures, and then remembered at the end of the day, faces smudged, a satisfaction in our hands. We started something together, Ray and me and Diego, a small thing we called Riverbend Restorations, out of my garage at first, and then out of a rented bay behind a plumbing supply store when we got 3 clients, and one of them paid us in full with a smile. Jamal did our books in exchange for us painting his food truck a color that looked like sunlight would taste if you could eat it. Marian came by once and stood at the edge of the bay. She watched us. She didn't know what to do with the smell of degreaser and the radio too loud and the way Ray swore like punctuation. She looked at the whiteboard with our months booked out and the line where I had written July, Hunter, 72 Chevelle, interior swap, and said, "It's busy," like she was surprised people believed in us. I said, "It is," and handed her a cup of water because it was hot and because kindness doesn't cost more just because it's hard. We went to Mason's grave on the anniversary with daisies and a little wooden dinosaur Ray found at a flea market. Kayla met me there with sunburn on her nose and a baseball cap. We sat on the grass. We didn't try to do anything except be. After a while, she said, "Do you think he would have liked the orange?" And I said, "He would have told me it looked like a tangerine," and she laughed in a way that made a few birds take off in a flutter. Tom's hair went more gray. He learned to say "I'm sorry" and mean it without adding a clause. He brought me a socket set the day we signed the lease on the bay, and against the top of the plastic case, he taped a photo of me at 19 in the garage, grease on my face, the Mustang in the background, my eyes bright. "Don't lose this one," he said, soft. We both knew he meant the picture and also something else we can't name or hold. We did holidays differently. We planned them like military operations, with care and an exit strategy. Kayla asked what time we'd get together, and I said, 2 hours is all I have, and everyone respected it, and no one brought up the deal we didn't speak of anymore, not because it was forgotten, but because it had been paid for, in money and in the long work of making new habits. There were nights I missed Acapulco so hard my hands hurt. Muscle memory is cruel and faithful. The Z is perfect in her way, but she doesn't sound like the Mustang. Sound is memory. Grief is memory. Pretty soon, memory is a mixtape you stop trying to sort. One evening, late, I drove the Z to the bridge and parked and watched the river move under the streetlights. A couple walked by with a dog whose paws clicked on the concrete. I thought about the bear book. I thought about Mason's small hand in mine, the weight that is too small to carry anything big and too big to forget when your hand is empty. I thought about the first time I held the Mustang's steering wheel and knew I had built something that would carry me. It wasn't a piece of metal. It was a promise I had made to myself. Not to be responsible in a way that hurt me. Not to be so flexible I folded in half at every request. To be kind without being edible. I texted Kayla a photo of the river. She sent me back a photo of her TV showing a kids' show and the dinosaur blanket folded at the end of the couch. She added a heart. No words. I didn't reply, because sometimes not replying is a way of letting something sit without pulling it apart. Summer fell into fall. Our shop moved to a space with skylights and a roll-up door that made me want to dance when we opened it every morning. We hired a high school kid named Abby on Saturdays, and she learned to bleed brakes and tell a polite man he was wrong without losing her smile. I put her name on our insurance, because safety, because protection, because receipts over rumors, because no one steals the future out of a kid's hands if I can help it. A pro bono legal clinic asked me to talk to a group one night about keeping your finances locked up and your titles out of other people's safes, and how to tell if you're about to be guilted into giving up more than you can afford. I stood at a lectern in the community center and told a story without names. People nodded. One woman cried. After, a teenager came up and asked me how much torque to use on a drain plug, and I answered, and then handed her my card and told her to call me if she ever needed help bleeding brakes. Small voices. Deep truths. We get there however we can. I didn't forgive like in the movies, with a swell of music and an embrace. I forgave in installments, the way Kayla paid me, the way days add up to seasons. I let the people I love be who they are, and I let myself be who I am, and sometimes we can be those things in the same room, and sometimes we do it by text, and both can be true. On a Tuesday, I drove the Z to the range of hills west of town and stopped at the overlook. The town lay below, the water tower a dull silver, the hospital's flat roof catching light. I shut off the engine. The air smelled like hot grass and something baking in a neighbor's kitchen far away. Silence is also a kind of engine. I slid the baby blue toy truck from my bag. The one I'd set on the table the day I found out, the one I'd kept because sometimes you need to hold on to something manufactured to get you through something irreplaceable. I set it on the dashboard. The sun hit it and made the paint glow like a memory. I sat with it. I sat with everything. It was enough. Boundaries are hard to learn if you were raised in a house where need was a god and love was measured by how much you gave up. I learned, late but not too late, that you can love a person and not let them spend your life for you. That you can bring daisies and also bring an envelope, and both can be acts of care. I learned that receipts matter. Not because you need to prove anything to anyone else, but because they're a way of honoring your own reality when everyone around you is rewriting history in real time. I learned that people can do terrible things for reasons that make sense to them, and that doesn't mean you have to stand there and nod while they do it again. Consequences are not cruelty. Sometimes they are love, taken out of the grips of manipulation and given back its backbone. I learned that found family shows up with socket wrenches and donuts and makes you laugh at nothing because that's what you needed. That the smallest voices, like a little boy asking when we can take the blue car again, can cut through all the noise and point at the truth. And I learned that closure isn't a slamming door. It's a click in your chest when a file goes back where it belongs. It's the sound of an engine settling into idle, warm and sure, after a long, winding road. If you ever find yourself sitting at a kitchen table with an envelope you wish you didn't have to bring, I hope you remember this. You're allowed to be the person who sets the terms for your own life. You're allowed to drive away and still send a photo of the river at dusk. You're allowed to start the car. You're allowed to stop. The last light held a minute longer. The river kept moving. I turned the key, listened for the catch, and let the road lead me home.